Thank you so much for staying with us. All Angles continues. We continue to look at the industrial security guard industry. Now, this said by a security guard we'll call Sharon. She said some company wants them find out, say you're pregnant, them have no location where you can comfortable, you have to stop work till you have your baby and come back. Maternity leave, not even sick leave. If you get sick leave, no pay, no benefits. Them say if you're dead, you must get 3.5 or $4 million. Them have nothing if you lose a finger, lose a foot, lose an eye or whatever. No overtime, just 12 hours straight. Some officers have to pay for the uniform from the day they enter the company till them left. Or when them not take the uniform, them have to pay. And some don't know what pay slip look like unless them pay for it. You want a pay slip? $500. Dr. Orville Taylor.
Yeah. We have to be a little bit accurate when it comes to history. The Labor Relations and Industrial Dispute Act was passed in 1975 and reinforced the rights of freedom of association, which were then in sections 13 and 23 of the Constitution. LRID section 4 talk about freedom of association.
Meaning freedom to join trade unions.
The right to join trade unions. The Employment Termination and Redundancy Payment Act of 1974 explicitly talked about workers being entitled to a stake, based on their service. In essence, it's like your job is is like property, and therefore it's not just a simple contract like any other contract. It is something. Your job is something that you have built up equity in, and as a result, when it is taken away from you, you are supposed to get something. Those were the underlying principles. And the 1980s, very bad reference because I was one of the mediators at the Labor Ministry during the period, and we had a great time. It was a period, yes, we had industrial conflict, but we had industrial disputes, but we had mechanisms by which we were able to resolve those industrial disputes. In 1988, there was an unconstitutional piece of legislation that was passed called the Fire Brigade Act. So there's nothing instructive or particularly impressive about the 1980s. It was a very dark period. And it was the bulk of collective bargaining, etc. Coming out of that, you saw a different kind of, not industrial peace, but you saw all of the other kinds of negatives associated with higher levels of social violence coming from out of that. And I remember at the end of by the beginning of the 90s, those of us who were paying attention, I was just winding up at the Ministry of Labor, that any attempt to move in the direction of keeping workers away from the fundamental rights and freedom would lead to levels of social violence, etc. That's a sociologist speaking.
So tell me what your reference in relation, because clearly you're referring to what Mr. Overton was saying earlier. So
I'm saying in essence that in 1988, the year after Mr. Overton was talking about, what happened was a breach of the workers' rights. It was later held that the Fire Brigade Act, which was passed, which pretty much said the same thing. It was repealed, I think, about 1990 or something like that. I don't remember exactly when. Afterwards, saying, listen, all of it's unconstitutional. The long and short of what I am trying to say is it is not an equivalent to give the person money and top up his or her salary in lieu of vacation or maternity leave, etc. In vacation leave, 2 weeks, how do you top up for the 52 weeks, 56 weeks? It doesn't happen. And in any event, it also subverts the intent of the holiday with pay order, which says that people should not go on for more than 3 years without taking vacation leave. The research coming from out of the ILO from the 1970s, the 80s, the 90s, International Labour Organization, is that people need to work under conditions which are called decent work, where they're supposed to get vacation leave, they're supposed to get maternity leave. Because you tell me how much sense it makes that people can pride themselves on underpaying their household workers and tell them to take care of their children, the most important asset. Just imagine underpaying somebody, employing somebody on a very fragile contract and then telling him to hold a gun and watch large amounts of money behind your back. It is a recipe for disaster. And there's a study that's ongoing now where they have established, along with others, a very direct correlation between the levels of social violence, crime, homicide, etc., and the kind of policies that allow for these things to happen. But guess what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But
It
Mr.
works.
Mr. Overton is saying,
Yes.
though, that all of these were things that were agreed on by the stakeholders in the industry, including, he's saying, the guards.
That's not true.
I am not aware
But
of that.
that's not true. The trade unions would have agreed upon that date.
Trade unions were not a part
The trade
of
unions,
discussion.
that's not true. Well, that's a subversion, sir. Because the
Well,
trade,
these
just a
persons
second,
were
John, I was there. The trade unionists were part of the Joint Industrial Council.
Which broke up in
Hold on a second.
thing.
I was part of those discussions. I remember with Rob Chung, for example, we had some great leadership coming from out of the security companies at the time. What happened is that as a result of that, there's a kind of splintering, and people started to race to the bottom. So without trade unions there as regulating, the workers in a position of weakness had this imposed upon them. They were not negotiating from points of strength. So for you to say it was something agreed upon, and I don't think that at the time that you were there, but I was there. It was something. It was not negotiation. They had no choice. They were not unionized because what had happened coming from out of the general strike of 1985, there was a concerted attempt by government. Yes, by government, and the union leadership at the time got cracked coming out of the general strike of 1985. And so the workers were victimized. So you are going to tell me now that victimized workers who have no protection could agree upon anything. They couldn't agree. They weren't negotiating. It was imposed upon them. So it's an unfair and dishonest statement.
But